There we go.
Got it. Okay. Well, I guess, Bonnie, do you just want to start out with the word since we're talking about it?
Oh, with the word.
With the word, we can do a little bit of an introduction for tonight. And so welcome to the Alaska Tapestry Weavers Zoom. If that's where you think you are, then you're here. Yeah. And we just had, this was an open studio night, and we just invited questions from you all. If you were having problems on something, or maybe questions about equipment, or some things you'd like to see demonstrated, but we will get to that in a little bit. We had a couple of questions. And then we do have a giveaway tonight, don't we, Bonnie?
We do. So how you earn entries in the giveaway is anytime you interact in the chat or ask a question or contribute to the conversation, I put your name into a drawing, and Nina has the lovely prize for tonight's drawing will be a couple of American Tapestry Alliance catalogs, 2 different ones that we will send you. And these are great resources to, just to look at beautiful weaving, but also to answer questions, because you can study these things and sort of look at some of the questions about, how do you weave something? How do you do a letter? How do you do different forms? What kind of yarns does somebody else use in their tapestry? And I've gotten a lot out of just looking at those. So that's going to be our prize for tonight. Is the lucky winner gets 2 American Tapestry Alliance catalogs sent to you.
All right. And then one of the other things in the email that we sent out, I had been reading about Archie Brennan, who was a Scottish weaver, and he wove in many different places, but he recently passed away, and he will be, there will be a book that he had co-written with someone. And that's coming out in January. So anyway, I was thinking about Archie, and Archie had a project. He's very amazing weaver, but he also is very welcoming of new weavers. And one of the projects he did to kind of break the ice with guilds and things was he had people weave a word, and this word, he started it with an H, but it was any word that started with an H, but he took 12 warp threads to weave that. And then he wanted you to break it down and weave the same word or a similar word in half the warp threads. So it could be 6 or 8 warp threads. But anyway, I did not weave an H word because I'm doing something with ravens. So I needed a raven word. But this is my word over 12 warp threads. And one of the other rules was that you cannot write it out. You can't draw it out. You can't plan it out. So you just kind of go and basically sketch with your yarn. And so that is what I came up with on the bigger one. Now for the fewer warp threads, I would definitely be simplifying some of this. But as Buffy said, you're not doing a whole lot of meet and separate. If this is woven, obviously woven like that, then you're going up here, and there is a lot of shape building that you're doing. You might lay this down, but then you're filling in here. You're kind of basically not using meet and separate. But this was a hard exercise, I thought. It was fun though. And if anybody else has a word, we'd love to see it. Lori?
Yeah, so trying to get my mute off there. So yeah, I made one, and I was just, as you were talking about the 12, oh, whatever they're called.
Warps.
I just counted mine, warps. I actually have 15. I don't know how that happened because I was very careful in counting. But yeah, so the H wasn't too bad. The A, oh, I had a hard time. I mean, I didn't want to like spend a lot of time where I was taking it apart and doing it, but you can see the bottom of it is much bigger. But yeah, it was very difficult. And the Y, you know, I started making it to where it was, you know, like a lowercase y with a kind of a tail. And I was like, well, where am I supposed to put it? So I did take that one apart and make it more of a capital. But yeah, it was fun to do. It didn't take that long, but I learned a lot. So
Yeah,
there we go. Harmony. That's what it is, harmony.
that's
Just
nice.
in case you can't read it. Yeah.
That's good. I like your A. That was tough to do because of the
Yeah.
curve and the circle.
With the little tail. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Great. Buffy has a start.
Yep. I was gonna do hello because there's my H and my E. Can you see it okay?
Yes. Yeah.
And I figured the L's would be pretty easy until I got to that O. Dreading the O. I was gonna do like an A, and you know, your A looks great, Lori. It just, I don't know, I just felt like I can't do it. So
Hey, Buffy,
It was
I've got a question on yours too.
uh-huh.
It looks like, can you hold it up again? It looks
Yeah.
like you did
Yeah.
2 warp threads on the center bar of your H, and then
I
you
did.
decided to go for it and do 1 on the E. How did that go for you?
Well, the E was kind of, yeah, I really didn't think about that too much. But the E was hard with the 3 lines. You know, when you're actually, and you've got the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 little sections of the purple or the eggplant. But yeah, that was hard. So I just wrapped basically.
Yeah.
Heard about wrapping. I've never seen it really done. Although Bonnie, I've seen a tapestry of yours with wrapping in it, a tree. But yeah, I just thought I'd try it and wing it. You know, it's like in knitting or any fiber thing, you can kind of wing it. So
do the threads go back behind the wrapped one? So in other words, it's the purplish color
here,
one thread. Yeah.
the yellowish or whatever.
The
it's
yellow
called,
is wrapped.
Yeah,
right?
that's, and then there's 2. I think
And then
there's
you've got 2 back and forth. So the
Mhm.
middle one, the middle bar of the E is actually, nothing goes to hold it there, right? Behind it.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it still stays okay, does it?
Well, right now it is. And then
Yeah.
I'll go across with my eggplant again.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just winging it, literally.
Mhm.
We'll see what happens. Help. Like Mina said, I could help.
I've got one coming up in the discussion about curves that has a double or warp interlock in places in it. So I can show you what happens when you interlock to hold that that single line in place. It changes things, and you can do a single warp wrap like that. It feels riskier than it actually is when you're doing it. It actually does hold together, but I'll show you what it looks like if you do interlock.
Does anybody else have letters or a word? Okay, and there was some question about how do you do the curves? So like Bonnie said, we'll talk about that later. That was one of the questions about that Bonnie will demo is how to build a curve. So actually, if there are no more words, maybe would you like to go right into that, Bonnie?
Sure.
And show us a curve and
Sure, absolutely. Like a lot of things in weaving, a lot of weaving a curve has to do with just trying a bunch of them and figuring out what kind of curves work and what kinds are more difficult. Like a perfect circle is very, very, very difficult. So a lot of times in my weaving, I will lop off a circle. Like I'll do a design where if there's a moon in the sky, it's not in the center of the sky, but I'll put it off to one side. So I only have to weave one part of that moon and not the whole thing. Or I'll do a tree across it. So to break up the circle, because that perfect circle is a very, very difficult form to weave. So symmetry is difficult. This would be a little challenging to weave because it's the same on both sides. So as you bring yarn up to build the shape, and curves are generally, you can weave them straight across, but generally a better approach or an easier approach is to weave them by shape building, where you would weave this part first and then bring another color in and fill all of that is usually the approach you're going to take. Or if you need to do an upside down one, you're going to create the negative space that this goes into and then fill. So it starts with that. But anytime you have something that is the same on both sides, the stair steps are going to be more prominent because you can't trick your eye into seeing a curve. Curves are not really curves. There is no such thing as a curve in weaving. It's pixelated, so it's actually little tiny stair steps. So the first thing I think is realizing that in the design. So this is a much, much easier curve to weave, because if you think about it, your steps are never going to be in the same place on both sides. So it's easier to fool your eye into seeing something that's smooth. So that's trick number one. Trick number two is this is possible to weave, but difficult. This is very, very easy to weave. So when Mina showed her, and Buffy's letters were the same way, both of them were woven on their side. So that helps a lot if you really think about which direction you want to weave something and what's the most important shape in your design, and weave to the direction where your most important element of your design is going to be easy for you to weave. The thing that you're going to struggle with the most, that should be the orientation. This is possible. This is a lot easier. So I'm going to switch over really quickly to the camera on my loom. And so what I've got in here, if you guys can see that, is part of the answer to the lettering question. So ironically, I picked something that already has a negative space built into it, this little shape right here. And there's tons of curves. There's a curve in here. There's another curve in here. There's even a curve where that tree branch came up. So I'll show you, this is the cartoon that this weaving is built on. It's a fox in the forest with 3 moons behind him, or a moon and 2 stars, if you want to be literal about it. And so this was built very much by doing shapes. So this part down here was woven first to create the negative space for the tail to go in. Then this section of grass underneath the fox's bottom was put in. And then I started on the fox, and now I'm in the place where his lighter fur on his chest is going to go in. And I wanted to point out too, this little section.
We're not seeing you.
What's that?
We don't see you.
You're looking at
Your
Bonnie's
back. We see the back of your head.
Look at the one that says Bonnie's loom, Helen. Don't look at me.
Look at what?
There's another screen that says Bonnie's loom. Let me spotlight for everybody.
Oh, okay. I'll look around for
Is
it.
that better? Can you see?
Oh,
that
there it
now?
is. Yeah.
Okay, all
Right.
right, so let me back up now that that's spotlighted. So the first thing woven in here was this curve that I'm pointing out. So that rise was woven so that the tail would lay into it. So this whole thing across was woven first. Then the tail comes in, and then when the tail was woven in, I created another curve here. Then this grass was woven in. And now I'm at the point where his chest fur underneath his chin is going to come in. But one of the things I wanted to point out is curves are really handy for a variety of reasons. And one of them is this little tree branch right here. That is, lines are very difficult in tapestry. And one of the ways that you can weave a line is by weaving the curve that defines that line and then weave the line in over the top of it. So by weaving this curve here, which is not difficult to weave, then I could lay just one sequence, a pass each direction over the top of it to create this branch, which is to me easier than some of my other options. So that's just a way that curves can really help. And you can see this branch I've left open at the top. And you can see this, this work thread that's exposed right there. That'll happen on tops of curves a lot because there's more built up here, there's less here, and there's no pressure keeping that yarn down. But when I weave the next shape over the top of that and beat it in, that's going to resolve itself and it'll come down and that little exposed work won't show anymore. So I wanted to show you that, and then we're going to go on to some other things so that you guys don't have to watch me weave. But the next thing I'm going to do is take my little sort of elongated curve and I'm going to mark it on my warp. We're going to assume that I had drawn this out in advance, but I didn't. So here's that kind of same sort of curve that that I showed on the picture that is not symmetrical. And while we're talking about other things, I'm going to go ahead and start weaving that so that you can see after we're done what I'm weaving. So I'm just going to start down here and I'll retreat back, progressive warp threads going up until I hit the top of this curve. And then we can come back and take a look at it. And I'll pass it back to you, Mina.
All righty. I feel like Mutual of Omaha, while Bonnie is doing that, we're going to be talking about something else. Another question that we had from Darla was she wanted to talk about people's favorite blendable tapestry yarns and suppliers. So and she said small, so I assume obviously that you're not probably going to be working at 4 ends per inch and using multiple strands of Highland, Harrisville Highland. So what she's talking about is maybe something that is, and let me switch my camera here. So can all of you see that? Okay,
Yep.
so probably talking about something that is a 12-2, which means in the bigger the number, the smaller the diameter of the thread. So and this 2, so this is written as 12/2. The 2 refers to the 2 plies that a yarn might be made up with. And I have so there's a 12/2. I have a 62 in silk. So this is a very tiny thread. It's still got 2 plies. So I'll tell you some of the ones that I've been using and some of the yarns that are easy for us to get here in Alaska. So this is a new yarn and it's by Just Yarns. and they have about 76 colors now. But what they do is dye them in these very subtle gradations. So you can blend these all, but they make for very subtle blends. And by blending or bundling, we mean that we're going to take maybe 3 strands or 4 strands of this particular yarn for 8 EPI tapestry. So we would actually weave with 3 or 4 different strands. And you can see that if you use all one color, you're obviously going to get the one color. But if you start adding colors, you can get some very subtle shifts in color. So bundling your weft is a good way to extend your palette if you have just a few yarns. So again, this is Gist, and it's pretty affordable. These are 1 ounce put-ups. They also come in 4 ounce cones. And this is actually, I was thinking that this was not very shiny, but it's actually pretty lustrous. It does have a bit of a fuzzy surface to it compared to Weaver's Bazaar. Now, Weaver's Bazaar is also very fuzzy. And this is a company that's in the UK, and they have like hundreds of colors. And they also have some gradations in color. But these are, again, you can use 3 to 4 of these strands bundled together. And I really like this yarn. It's just expensive to get here. The shipping is a bit expensive. The yarn itself is not bad, but then when you talk about shipping, it's kind of rotten. And then they come in fine or medium weight. You can probably use this as 3 strands per 8 EPI. And yes, the Gist, I'm sorry, is the Array. ARRAY is the name of their tapestry yarn. With Weaver's Bazaar, it's just the fine or medium. They also make a heavy. Let's see. Oh, another one that's easy to get here that is suitable for weft bundling. I think this is an 18-2 as well. So this one is close. They say it's closer in weight to the Weaver's Bazaar, but you can see it's quite a bit fatter. And this is Epic. It's capital E, capital P, small I, capital C, and Timeless Textiles is the company that sells this. They make this in a variety of put-ups, so it is very affordable. They also kettle dye this. So while the Gist, Array, and the Weaver's Bazaar are very uniform in color, this Epic gives a really pretty kind of gradation throughout your weaving. I can show you on my color. I used bark, the color bark, in this weaving here. And this is 4 strands at 8 EPI, but you can see that color gradation here. So you won't get an even color, but the Epic is also suitable for blending. And by EPI, I mean ends per inch. So when you look at your loom, you will have a coil, or maybe you'll have teeth. And when you warp that, if you measure it, you'll have 8 EPI, or 8 warp threads per inch. And you can have if you double that, if you double warp your loom, you could get 16 EPI or ends per inch. So that is just a measurement of how far apart those warp threads are. The other thing I like to, let me say one more thing. All of these have somewhat a lustrous quality to them. So they're kind of shiny yarns. But when you bundle them, that could affect the luster that you're seeing. Sometimes to get a little bit of luster in my weaving, I like to add a strand of silk and bundle that with a strand of wool yarn. And you can see here on, maybe you can see, I don't know. You can see there's a little bit of shine, a little bit of shimmer, definitely with this silk thread and this silk thread. You can see how shiny those are. And it does add a little bit to your weaving. I've also used crochet pearl cotton, and that I don't use this a lot because I don't feel like the cotton is as forgiving and goes where you want. It doesn't fill in the curves the way wool does. So I bundle this with wool as well. And if any of you are lucky enough to be hand spinners, you can also make your own yarn. And you can use that alone, or you can use that bundled. I've got 2 strands of Weaver's Bazaar here, bundled with a somewhat furry hand spun yarn. And that will add texture to your weaving. You can kind of see here in this little weaving, I use some Angora in the ear just to give it a little bit of texture. And in person, you can see that. You can't see it so well on Zoom. But, you know, you don't have to stick with one type of yarn at all in your weavings. You can mix and match yarn when you're doing your weaving. So Bonnie, are you ready to show us a curve yet, or?
Yeah, I am indeed. I've made some curve progress while you've been talking, and let me turn this camera back on. Okay, so let me scooch this a little bit closer. Oops. Okay. Sorry, technical adjustment here. Sorry, my tripod just went absolutely nuts.
Oh. And we can come back if you want to.
Yeah, let me fix this, and if you want to come back.
Okay. So, oops. So when we're bundling, you can do a butterfly, and if it's wool that you're using, a butterfly will keep those 3 or 4 strands together. However, I like to wrap onto a bobbin, and that definitely keeps all of the strands together and keeps the tension the same on all of the strands that you're using in your bundle. And I think there was a question here. Does bundling the yarn affect the selvages? And by that, if you mean, do we get little bubbles at the side? You can, if you don't keep the tension on all on all the strands that you're using. So let's say this one kind of got out of whack, and now I might see a little bit of something might poke out. so that's why I use a bobbin. You just have to make sure that all of your strands are together and they're all tightly next to each other. You don't want one to be looser than the other, if that makes sense. Okay, so one thing that we wanted to do tonight, I know it's difficult, you know, if you're a newbie and you don't want to invest a bunch in yarn, or you don't know exactly what you're looking at, it's nice to get your hands on some yarn. And so I have accumulated a bunch of weft, and I'll tell you what I have. Oh, and I forgot a yarn. There is a Swedish yarn that's called Faru that is a singles yarn that has a very matte surface, but that is also a nice yarn to do tapestry weaving with when you're doing bundling. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yarns. And I thought, if you are interested, I will send everybody a sample of each of the ones I have. It may not be color coordinated, might not be the color that you wanted, but that's why yarn companies also make color cards for the most part. But then there should be enough in your, with what I would send you, to make a little yarn sampler. So what I have here is all of my different yarns, and I just, you know, you can weave stripes, you can weave whatever you want, but I have tagged everything here. And so it's nice if you pick your preferred EPI and your preferred set. So a set is the interaction between the thickness of the warp you use and your weft and how your EPI. So if you do this on something like an 8 EPI, well, I like that. I don't think I would go smaller or bigger anytime soon. And you tag this, then if you do 15 sequences on each yarn, then you'll get a really good idea of coverage. You'll get a really good idea what that yarn does relative to the other yarns that you have. So that's an easy, fun way to just make a reference. And so if anybody's interested, okay, then I will ask you to, I'll put my email up on the chat. If you just send me an email with the subject yarn, and then if you would send me a self-addressed stamped envelope, let's say send me an envelope, I have a padded envelope here, something like that, and then put $3 worth of postage on it, send that to me. That should be enough to cover several samples of yarn. And I'll send you supplier information about that too. So I think that would be fun. I wish I had the opportunity when I was just starting. So I think that's a good idea. And also the Fairbanks Weavers and Spinners Guild is letting us use some of their Patronea type yarn. So I will be sending samples of that too. And you'll get a chance to see how that yarn that might be intended for needlework could be used. So I'll, are you ready for curves, Bonnie?
I am. Thank you for the little technical assist there. Okay, so I've spotlighted my loom, and forgiving the little imperfections that happen when you're speed weaving a little technical exercise. There's a couple things I wanted to point out. So you can see here's where I drew my cartoon, and here's the progress of the curve. I started out by just weaving it exactly where my markings were, and I stopped at a point where I wanted to point something out. one of the little tricks that you can use to make sure that you're weaving a smooth line is picking whether you turn over a raised warp or a lowered warp. If you turn over a lowered warp, and so we're talking about a receding line. So the line I'm the curve I'm weaving is a receding line. When you do that, if you turn over a lowered warp, it creates a little valley that yarn drops into, which creates a jagged edge. If you turn over the raised warp, it creates a smoother line. I'll show you exactly what I mean. I stopped at a point where I have a choice. I can cover this warp right here, which is a raised warp. This is one that's raised at the moment. I can cover that, or I can pivot right here on this lower warp. If I pivot on the lower warp, that leaves a big chunk of this warp exposed, which is going to create that little valley. If, however, I turn over the raised warp, if I back out and say, whoops, I didn't want to do that, and I go over here, this is the front of the work that I'm on. So you can see with very little effort, that's creating a little bit of a smoother approach. So that's one thing you can do. You can stress about that and think about that and figure that out. If you do that, you will only be able to turn every second warp. You can't turn on every single warp doing that because only half of them are raised at a time. And you can see in this curve, if we go back to what happened, I'm all the same coming up, kind of mush this down so you can see. I'm all the same coming up to here. Then I went up one here, and again here, and again way back here. So that first step was after just one warp. This one was after two. This one was after three. So you can see that my curve is steepening as I go. That's one of the things that an irregular curve will trick your eye. Here, it's only two again, and then one, and then one, and then one, and then one. And so all those places where I'm only going up by one, I can't make a choice which warp to turn over every single time because it's a steeper curve at that point. It's only going up one at a time. So you can see how on a curve that's irregular, the thing that makes it look like a curve and not like a triangle is that you're not going up one and up one and up one. You're going up one and then over three before you go up again, or over two before you go up again. And that's where it helps drawing the curve onto the warp. I'm going to weave the rest of this really quickly, and then I'm going to show you my last little trick that helps smooth out curves. I also want to point out when I marked this on the warp, I marked it in lines. I used the pen directly on the warp, and I did kind of these sloppy black lines. And when I get my fingers out of this, I'll show you this a little bit. So when you look at my markings, you can see that there's this line in ink that I'm following around. When you're working with something that you want to be precise in terms of a design, the far better technique, if I can find my Sharpie someplace in all this, the far better technique, and I'm going to close my shed to do this, the far better technique is to dot your warp, right? And so you can see by dotting it, I'm marking a very specific place instead of if I sketch on the warp, I get these kind of blurry lines of where I'm going. And so if you want to be in curves, I kind of find that blurry line sometimes helpful because I can make my decisions to go anywhere in there. But if you want to be precise, you're going to mark just a very careful little dot on every place you want to go. I hope that makes sense a little bit. So just finishing out the top of this curve. So here's a point that happens in curves a lot is I have gotten to the point where I don't need to capture the end, my selvage anymore. So I'm going to move my selvage over, move that side one warp as well. And I think that's a good thing to pay attention to in curves is sometimes they are evolving from both directions at once instead of one direction or the other. And I've got just a couple more here. And you can see I'm just building this very, very top. I'm also starting to mush it in with my fingers rather than with my fork. And that's in part because it's getting tighter, but it's also in part because I'm getting to the part of the curve that I really want to control. And on this next step, I'll show you exactly what I mean. So I've basically got my whole curve here. The last thing I'm going to do is come all the way to the edge of the curve, this direction. And I'm going to take my fingers or my fork, whichever, and mush the yarn. I'm basically manipulating that curve right where I want it to be. And the idea there is that as you're weaving, I heard, I don't know who it was, maybe Sarah Sweat had this great saying. It was basically just yarn follows yarn. So if as the last step of weaving a form, you take your yarn and you put it exactly where you want it, the next pick of yarn is going to follow that pick. So let's say, I'm going to mess around with my fell line from underneath a little bit. Let's say I had the ability to say, oh, I want a little extra curve in there. If I set that in my last pick, and I've taken this one piece of yarn, this last pick of yarn, and I've gone all the way across that contour. But if I push this little section up a little bit, the next pick is going to follow that one. And that's the yarn follows yarn part. So that little smoothing technique, that's also going to help trick your eye a little bit into following that curve where the weaver wanted it to go.
Oh, Bonnie, I think we lost your loom.
Oh,
Sorry. No, you're back.
okay, perfect. Yeah, my iPhone just put up a little message there. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you is a little technique that you can use to deal with the color that's coming over this. So I've changed shed, and I am going to split my yarn. So I'll put my hands up where you can see them. I've just taken my 2-ply yarn and I'm splitting it in half. Some of you have seen Mina do this in classes, and you can split it a little bit more easily using a fishing swivel, but you can just do it with your hands. So I'm in my next shed and I'm putting that red in there. And let's say my next color was going to be this gray. I'm going to take a 2-ply of gray. And if you're using bundled weft, like Mina was just talking about, you can do this with the individual colors in your weft bundle. And so what I'm doing here in getting a piece of red and a piece of gray, it's a 2-ply yarn. So I'm putting one piece of each color in the same shed, and I'm laying them right on top of each other, and I'm mushing them down into place. Okay. So what I've done is, in the way that the weaving works with those little kind of kernel shapes, I've just created a straight line where weaving doesn't usually allow one, right? So, and I've created that by laying one strand of the red and one strand of the gray together. And it creates that very, it's hard to see with all the markings on top of it, but it creates a very defined line between the red layer and the green layer. Now I've got a couple of things going on here where I've got a few lice along the steep part of the curve. That is just a function of having no yarn filling in on top of that yet. That would resolve as soon as you wove more on top of it. And I'm also weaving in a spot on my loom that doesn't have any structure underneath it. But the two things that really help this curve be defined are that last pick down it, and then laying the split weft technique where the red and the gray. Let me see if I can even just close up on just that part. You can see at the very top there how smooth that line is where that red and the gray meet together. And there's lots of different ways that you can play with that idea with curves. You can outline them in black. You can outline them with a contrasting color, all kinds of things. But that idea of taking one pass of yarn to follow the curve before you start filling in will help a lot. And then keeping curves in forms that don't easily turn into squares or triangles. You know, having gentle slopes and having them be irregular from one side to the other. So any question? Oh, Jasmine had a great question about the red and the gray. Are they twined or woven? They are woven. The red and the gray are sitting right on top of each other. They are not plied together. The red sits and then the gray sits right on top of it. So you don't twist them. You don't, it's not sumac, it's not twined. It's just one pass that has the underneath color with the top color laid absolutely flat on top of it. And it's easy to see. Here's an example of one I did a little bit earlier today that has, you know, this very, and this is at 6 EPI. So this is at an EPI that would normally not provide that smooth a curve. And it's just created by laying those wefts right on top of each other. So there it is. And there's more in curves, like 90% of weaving is curves. Everything that isn't an angle is a curve. So there's a lot more, but there's a couple of tricks that I've gotten along the way.
That sounds good. Did you, I know Buffy was the one who posed that question. So do you have any other questions? Or are you trying to weave a different kind of curve than that, or you just kind of wanted to get?
No, that was very helpful. And Bonnie, on your little 6 EPI sampler that you just showed us, what yarn did you use? And did you just use one strand?
Yeah, so this is Harrisville Highland.
Okay.
And it's just one strand. Yep. And then actually there's something else in here. This is a little pointy at the top, but this is another way to deal with curves really easily. This is regular hatching going across here, where you've got a complete sequence of one color alternating with another. That's another really simple way to get curves into a composition without, you know, kind of biting off all of this perfection that feels like it has to happen when you weave a curve.
Yeah, that's great. What was the other loom that you were using on your fox? What is that loom? It's a mirror.
Yeah, it's a Murex. That's a not a little guy, but whatever the next step up is, a 12-inch Murex.
The little sister or something
Little
like that?
sister, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
it's I think it's the big sister.
Oh, is it a big sister?
Yeah, I think it's called a big. It's what I have too. I didn't know. Yeah, you had one too. Yeah. Good looms.
Really great looms.
Thank
Here's
you so much.
some.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you all aren't familiar with Sarah Sweat, Sarah with an H and SWETT, she is the absolute queen of letters, weaving letters. And there is a post at her field guide to needlework for August 9th, 2016. If you want to look in particular at how she weaves curves and letters, that is a good post. Okay. Did anybody else have any other questions? Or any questions about yarn? Yeah, Claire. You're on mute.
Okay. So what is your favorite warp that you use for your little tapestries?
Ah, that's a good question. And my favorite company is Balkans, and the type of warp they make is seine twine, SEINE. And this is also used to make fishing nets. It's extremely smooth, very tightly twisted, not very stretchy warp at all. And as far as my favorite set that I use, it's probably 12/6, which is a little on the light side for 8 EPI, which is where I usually weave. But I also like 12/9, and that's the 12 is referring to the size of the fiber, and then the 9 is referring to how many plies it has within that strand of warp. And I would be happy also to, with the yarn samples, to send a length of, I think I have 4 different weights of warp, and just send a sample and you can see what that is. But I think basically you have to kind of find your sweet spot with the warp plus weft combination you're using.
I can just add to that. One of the things Mina and I noticed when we taught a class together was that my preference is for, I grew up in the Southwest, and so I've seen a lot of Navajo tapestry and Rio Grande tapestry, and have been influenced like that. So my preference is for slightly ridged tapestries that actually show that textile tradition. And so my preference is sometimes to go a little bit heavier on the seine twine. I prefer all the same brands for the same reasons, but I do tend to go heavier because I like that, I like the surface to look a little bit bumpy. But then like on something like the fox, I don't want him to be bumpy. So I'll choose a different weight seine twine just because of that. So I think that's part of the preference choice, is what you like to weave with, what works, what makes your fabric feel like it's got integrity and it's not going to move around on you. But also, if you want the surface to have a little bit of tooth to it or not, and what you choose for seine twine will have an impact on that.
What was the company called again?
Balkans,
Balkans.
BOCKENS. And for some reason, there is there's always this, I don't know, we've been going through a shortage of this. So I know that Eugene Textile was out of the 12/9, right, Bonnie?
Yeah, Eugene Textile is out of the 12/9, but Merrick's has it, and so does Woolery, I think. Just real quickly, I know Jasmine has her hand up and we're still continuing this conversation, but if I can share my screen for a second, I found Sarah's words.
Oh yeah.
So that's,
Oh my gosh.
right, that's one of them. And here's a whole page of her words.
That is so cool.
There, and these are tiny. She weaves with a lot of kind of locally harvested stuff. She lives in the Palouse and does things like weaving with milkweed. She weaves with coffee filter paper. So she's, if you're not yet completely addicted to her blog and her website, you need to get addicted to it because it's pretty spectacular. So anyway, I just had to share that.
That's great.
That is great.
Jasmine, did you have a question?
Oh, I just wanted to add to the warp conversation. Really, my introduction to tapestry was, I was taught by a traditional Navajo weaver. And I don't know, I've got here, this is it's a single ply, tightly spun wool weft is what he taught me to use, which is way different, right, from a seine twine. It's got a lot more stretch. So just as offering a counterpoint to that, I'm not saying one is better or not. but just there's lots of options.
Is that the
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
traditionally double
So-
spun, Jasmine, where they spin it and then spin it again to get that that tighter twist on it?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's cool stuff.
Yeah. And you can use linen for warp too.
So Jasmine, did you spin that yourself or did you buy it? Where did you purchase it?
Oh, I bought it at a trading post outside of Fort Defiance in New Mexico. I forget
Okay.
the name of the trading post.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think Brown Sheep Wool has wool warp.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Eugene Textile might too, but yeah, that's really special to be able to get it right at the source almost. But I think some other suppliers carry that too.
I think warp is also, it's a lot like weft. We don't see it, but it affects, our experience of weaving so much, and it affects the finished product. I think it's really well worth the time to play with it, to try a few different things, and not just see what you like, but see what changes in the moment of weaving, but also in the finished product, because it's there's so many different ways of coming at it.
Yeah. And I think if there aren't any other questions, maybe wrap it up just by first saying that the Fairbanks Weavers and Spinners Guild will have open studio hours in January on from January 5th to the 26th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Davis Hall on the Tanana Valley State Fairgrounds site. So Bonnie, are we going to have an Eventbrite sign up for that? And we're going to have different days. We'll concentrate on different weaving types or spinning. So
Right.
please watch our website for that, Fairbanks Spinners, Weavers and Spinners Guild.
If we do have a sign up, it will be related to COVID safety to make sure that numbers don't exceed our maximum safe limit for the space. But we'll know about that as we get into the last week of December, and we'll let everybody know. But definitely put it on your calendars. It's going to be a fun time to see people working and to have hands-on to some questions and share ideas. I think it'll be really exciting.
Okay, do we want to do a drawing?
Yes. Yeah.
Do we bring
Can
our
I show
looms?
something that I wove fairly recently?
Oh, yes,
Yes,
Helen. Helen has
I don't know
something
whether,
to
I don't,
share.
it's actually not tapestry. It's Theo Mormon technique, which
Ooh.
basically is a tapestry on top of a background. And we had a priest being, turning into a priest, a woman who was ordained a priest. So I wove her, I wanted to weave her a stole. And I don't know if I could share my screen. I could then show you my thing, but I'm not sure how to do that. Here's the share screen. And I'm host and disabled participant screen sharing, so I can't share my screen, right? So who's the host?
Hang on, Helen. Bonnie is. And she should be able to tell us in a second.
Yeah.
Right. And
Hang on.
I don't know when, I've got it on my photos app or whatever.
There we go. You should be able to now, Helen.
Oh, okay. So share screen. Oh, okay, here it is. Share.
Oh, wow.
Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to, because this is regarding tapestry. So with the Theo-Mormon technique, there's nothing showing on the back of the stole, by the way. And the but I have a rather wide warp that you can go around. So I was trying to do things and they didn't turn out right. So like this was supposed to be 3 balls. Well, when I was trying to do it, the 3 balls turned into 3 hearts because of the width of the different distance between the warp threads. And so and this one, I was weaving it from this end up. And so this one, I started that, and that was going to be one of those Jerusalem crosses or something, a sort of rather fancy cross. And then I got it off the loom. I went back, I took a break and I saw, wow, that's a chalice. So I turned it into a chalice. This down here was supposed to be trees, and they turned into they were supposed to be black spruce trees because she was going to go out to the bush, and every village is on a river. So here's a river, and then this is supposed to be spruce trees. But anyways, and this is IHS, which is a Christian symbol, and this is Chi Rho, which is another Christian symbol. And so those came out okay, but it was the curves, like you were saying with the tapestry. And then these are fish, which is also a Christian symbol. And so anyway, she likes her stole. But weaving it gave me all kinds of problems. And I guess I could go and see if there's any, maybe this is one of them. Yeah, that's the river. That's the IHS. What's this? Yeah, that's the hearts, which was going to be, see how it goes straight?
Yeah.
And then I did get a curve at the top a little bit. So anyway, while you were talking about curves, I thought I'd show you these things.
Yeah, wonderful.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's that.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was fun to do different, and they were just singles. I didn't use a applied thread for, and it's different. It's rather straight cottons. I think I had cotton in one and wool in another one and whatever different things. Is this one? No. What's that? It's hard to tell when it's here. Yeah, anyway, that gives you some sort of idea of problems and whatnot and solutions.
It's interesting how problems take you in different directions, that the weaving takes you someplace. You can't always tell where it's going to be.
It took me from balls to hearts.
That's fantastic.
So anyway,
Helen.
thank you for that. That was a great teaching session. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I can
it really was.
Stop share screen, however you do that now. I don't know. I don't know how to stop share.
There should be just a red, when you hover at the top, there's a red stop share.
Oh, up there,
Yeah.
chat, I've got. Where's new share? What's that say? It says new share. I don't want a new share. Anyway, you can just cut me off or something. Here's chat. I don't want that. Anyway,
There we go.
I just want to get off it and I don't know how. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I just cut off your share.
I saw stop share.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, that's good. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. All right. So we're almost at we're a little bit over our hour. So we have some things in the works for speakers coming up. We don't quite have them all in place, but we'll let you know. And keep watching the Fairbanks Weavers and Spinners Guild website, because we'll also post the Alaska Tapestry Weavers schedule there. So do you have a name out of your hat there, Bonnie?
Yeah, so here's the little hat or the bowl, and wow, it looks like the winner is Amy Mackinac.
Oh, good.
Yay, Amy. I'll reach
All
out
right.
to you, Amy, and figure out where you want me to drop your catalogs.
Great, congratulations. And we, as always, invite topics, things that you'd like to hear about, things that you have trouble with, and anytime you can reach out to Bonnie or me and just ask a question and we can try to help you out. And please take me up on my yarn offer. And it just gives me an excuse to replenish those stores. Anything else, Bonnie?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I will be sending out a recording of today's session to everybody on the Alaska Tapestry Weavers mailing list. Some of you heard about today's session through either the Fairbanks Weavers and Spinners Guild or the Anchorage Weavers and Spinners Guild. If you did, and you're not on our list for this group, just drop me a line at the email I just put in the chat. I'll make sure that you get on the list and you get the recording. And the recording, feel free to share it with friends. Our goal is to get information about tapestry weaving out to as many interested people as possible. So you don't have to keep this a secret. Invite friends to the next section, share the video, and the more the merrier.
Thank you. You guys are very inspiring. It's fun.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining
It
us.
was wonderful.
Yeah.
Happy
Thank-
weaving.
Happy weaving, everybody.
Happy weaving.
And
Stay
happy
warm.
Thank you.
holidays
Have a good
too.
evening.